Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Film Fan Club Show. My name is Sam Carrico. I want to thank everyone for the flood of messages that came in after last week's show congratulating me on my Emmy win. I could have done it without you, just to be clear. No cap, guys. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tulsa legend Travis Meyer is on the show to talk about Twisters. Feel free to use the time codes feature to jump right to that. I won't blame you. But if you're still here, Twisters has become quite the phenomenon here in Oklahoma. The town of Sapulpa is mentioned several times throughout the film. Residents were thrilled. We talked to a couple there, and I was blown away by how much they don't sound like they're from London, England. Breaking news, 84-year-old actor George Lazenby has announced his retirement from the profession. In other news, actor George Lazenby is still alive. In a statement on X, Lazenby endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to take over for him in November. Okay, this is a big one. San Diego Comic-Con just wrapped up. At the Marvel Studios panel, it was announced that the Russo brothers are returning to direct the next Avengers movie, and that Robert Downey Jr. will also be returning, but this time as villain Doctor Doom. Wow. There goes any chances of a Doolittle 2. This, of course, comes after the previous villain, Kang, was written out because of the actor Jonathan Majors' criminal history. Apparently, having a criminal history wasn't so much the issue as having criminal history, but not having brought in $5 billion for the Walt Disney Company. You know, because Robert Downey Jr. had... Anyways, not to be outdone, DC Studios said, oh yeah? Well, here's a trailer for an animated TV show. Boom! No, I didn't watch it. Restore the Snyderverse. Now, speaking of ambitious projects, our favorite Doctor has some news. The Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies has announced a new UNIT spin-off. I'm excited. Finally, we get to watch everyone at UNIT dealing with paperwork and small talk while the Doctor's off saving time and space. Imagine a behind-the-scenes episode. Alright, who's gonna tell the Doctor we lost the TARDIS in the parking lot? Alright, let's do a real monologue, shall we? When we relaunched the Film Fan Club Show, of course recorded live on tape from Tulsa, Oklahoma, our state was in the middle of a filmmaking renaissance. I was deep in pre-production on Killers of the Flower Moon, Reservation Dogs Season 1 was in the middle of filming, and Tulsa King Season 1 was also on the horizon. Things were looking great for the future of the craft in the Sooner State. But by 2023, everything had taken a turn. Shockwaves were heard throughout Tulsa and Hollywood when Killers of the Flower Moon became a box office bomb and was completely shut out of the Academy Awards with 0 wins. Reservation Dogs came and went, ending with Season 3. Tulsa King, yes, is coming back for a Season 2, but they left Tulsa to film the show in Atlanta. What the hell? Stallone himself even compared shooting in Oklahoma to being in hell. Yeah, maybe temperature-wise it's hot as hell, but in terms of which houses more criminals, well, I'm not gonna lie, it was a little disheartening. Like, these big productions came here when they saw a profit, but when it didn't pay off, it was on to the next thing. There is some hope, though. My team on Killers of the Flower Moon may not have won the Oscar, but I did win the Emmy, okay? Killers may have been a box office flop, but Twisters is looking like a hit, with a domestic projected opening of around 80 million. And hopefully, it has that cultural impact that Killers didn't. Already, I'm hearing of people around the world discovering Oklahoma as this wild place where these massive tornadoes happen. And as an Oklahoman, it's so special for me to go to a movie and watch a famous lead actress look out across a beautiful landscape and say, I love Oklahoma. Even if it's in a thinly veiled British accent. So through the ups and the downs, I rest assured tonight, knowing that it didn't stop with Killers of the Flower Moon, and it's not gonna stop with Twisters either. Reservation Dogs creator Sterling Harjo has already filmed the pilot for his next FX series here with Ethan Hawke. And as much as I love Killers of the Flower Moon, Reservation Dogs, Twisters, my favorite part about this upcoming project is that it's not about something intrinsic to Oklahoma. By all accounts, it's a crime noir drama that just happens to be set in Tulsa. And I feel like that's where we're headed. I feel like filmmakers are catching on that Oklahoma is ripe with story potential outside of the classic tropes. And as a wise man once said, if you can feel it, chase it. All right, we've got a great show for you tonight. Let's get right to our discussion of Twisters with Travis Meyer. All right, and joining me now, he is the chief meteorologist for KOTV, the News on 6 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Big get for our show. Travis Meyer is with us. Hey, Travis.
Hey there, Sam. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. And again, it's just a pleasure. Thank you for making the time.
You're so welcome.
I mean, when we're talking Twisters, I feel like there's one name that comes to mind when we're talking Twisters. We got to talk to you. You are the voice, the meteorology voice in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So for our audience, though, our national audience, I guess, could you give us a little bit of a background kind of so they can see what I see, a little bit of your background working in meteorology and what kind of gives you the bona fides to talk about a movie like this?
All right. Well, there was a time period when I grew up in Nebraska, and I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and I was always following the weather, and it was always a big deal because it was when you farm, weather is everything. It's 90% of the law of the land. If you don't have rain, if you don't have the right crops, you fail pretty much. So I spent a lot of my time studying weather. Like even when I was 5, 6 years old, I was constantly glued to the weatherman on TV because that was our main source. And then I decided to do that. I became a meteorologist, came to Tulsa in the early 80s, and I have continued that process. And I love coming to Tulsa because I was like, in Oklahoma, we're a better place to study severe weather, hail, and of course, tornadoes and twisters than here in this state. So it's been a course of about 40 years of watching what's going on. It's been pretty impressive. Each year, there's always something new. There's always something different. And science has really changed a lot through the course of the last 40 years, obviously. So that's pretty much the history of it in a nutshell.
And I'm going to admit something that's a little bit embarrassing, but I haven't seen the first Twister movie. Twisters, the sequel, was my first experience with this franchise. So I'm assuming, of course, that you've seen the first Twister. It's kind of a staple here in Oklahoma. And it's a little bit of a twofold question. Can you kind of reminisce a little bit on the first Twister, your impact its impact on you over time, and then also seeing the film industry in Oklahoma grow just from your perspective?
Yeah, Twister, the first one that came in was kind of like, well, hey, this is kind of exciting because chasing was relatively new. It had really been evolving over the course of the 10, 15 years previous to that. People started picking up on that idea because there was a lot more mobility, there was a lot more data. So there's the ability to kind of get around without driving into a tornado and not knowing it. So that's kind of where, at that time, I thought, well, that's an interesting movie concept. That'd be fun. And they came around. In fact, a little known fact is that the Oklahoma Tourism Department at that time, I worked for the ABC affiliate in Tulsa, and they asked the ABC affiliate to have meteorologists do a weather tape for Steven Spielberg that would talk about why they should come to Oklahoma to film Twister. And so I got the opportunity to do that. And so I was talking basically on tape, might have been 3/4-inch tape back at that time. I said, Mr. Spielberg, there's not a better place than Oklahoma to be if you're actually going to film one on Twisters. You need to be here in this state because we have everything. And then we went into a big, long video, and then I did some excerpts and stuff and talking about how many tornadoes, why it's a big deal here in Oklahoma and all that. And so that got sent on to Spielberg, and I can't remember who else. There was somebody else that was with him at the time. And so I was kind of really zoned into that just because of that.
Yeah.
And then when the movie came out, I was like, man, it's not bogus, but it was just like, there's so much Hollywood that was put in there. I thought it was going to be more realistic than Hollywood. And I felt it was real Hollywood. But what was interesting was that in 1999, we had a tornado outbreak that was a little bit reminiscent of the first Twister movie. And so I was like, you know what? I said, in reality, that movie wasn't that far off when you consider if you have a massive outbreak, and that's what the whole story was centered around, was pretty much a massive outbreak of tornadoes in Oklahoma. We had that in 99, then all of a sudden I had a different reflection of Twister. And so that's where my thought came from. In fact, during the movie that we just went to, I have a Twister tie. I should have worn it today, but I have a Twister tie from the original movie that they gave the meteorologist that helped him out. And so it was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. And that just so I mean, we kind of have you in part to thank for the movie industry growing over time here in Oklahoma for making that pitch. How often do you get to make a pitch to Steven Spielberg of all people? That's insane.
Yeah, that never happens, and that will never happen again. But that was just a moment. And at that time, that was in the 80s. And so that was when Steven was kind of, kind of peaking, I guess you could say, into that beginning of his career where he really got super good. And so I didn't know a ton about it other than, man, he had some Star Wars movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool, though. And just at the thought of actually being able to do that. And they just said, hey, you're going to do this. I was like, hey, me? Okay, I'll do it. So I was pretty happy.
That's pretty cool. So, okay, that kind of brings us a little bit. So that's the involvement with the first Twister movie. And then obviously the new Twisters film with a plural Twisters has not only some News on Six ties, but just ties to meteorologists across our state. Can you kind of talk a little bit through that process of as it was getting made, you hear about they're making a sequel, them shooting it here in Oklahoma, some of your colleagues being involved directly in it, and then going and finally seeing the premiere recently?
Okay, yeah. And so about 3 years ago, some of the pre-Twister people were coming in, and they spent the afternoon with us at the station. We went through, and I went through a whole bunch of my experiences. Gave them pictures. We gave them some pictures of our storm team and kind of how we evolved, and gave them a lot of historical information. They took down. They were a great group. There was 3 of them, and they were very, very what should we say? Very effective in terms of what they were asking. Like their questions were very good, so they were well researched before they got to me, and they also had the ability to kind of really think that through and say, and then ask a follow-up question and be like, oh, that's pretty impressive. Because you kind of think, I don't want to say I make people in Hollywood look like, it's like, hey, here we are, here's what we're doing. I don't care what reality is. They were looking for reality at that point. And so they were looking for things that we were doing. They were looking at our storm trackers. They were looking at how we interact on TV. They were looking at the information that we have, how we gather the information, how we put it to use, and then how we took it to the viewer at the end part, and then what the storm trackers, the troubles that they got into, and all that. So it was a long day, and it was a great day. And I said, this will be interesting to see how this plays out. They went to several other TV stations in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, looking for similar stuff, and then picking up some pictures from some different staffs at different places as well. So it was really well encompassed. And then we waited, and we heard some about the movie. We had one of our storm trackers in the movie. He was an extra, so he was in one of the scenes where a lot of storm trackers, is storm tracker convergence, as we call it.
Yeah.
When people are getting ready for storms, and they all kind of converge in ground zero areas. And so there's a lot of history, or there's a lot of cool things behind the scenes that happen, or interesting things, maybe nerdy to some folks. But we ended up he got in the movie. We didn't end up with all the pictures and stuff we gave them. I don't know if anybody in our group ended up with nobody had mentioned it, but we knew that the movie was moving along at a pretty good pace. And then people that were in the movie, and then also they did not release, which, especially when we were talking to them, we kind of want to know what the plan was, how it was laid out. They would not divulge anything. They were very much tight-lipped on everything. Did not want the story to get out whatsoever. So that was kind of interesting, because I thought, well, they'll probably share some stuff. They didn't share hardly anything. And so then when we ended up hearing that it was finished, and then it was finally time for the big Twisters movie to come out, we were pretty impressed by Stacia Knight went with me, and a couple of our storm trackers, Vaughn Castor, Sequoia Quinton, who's the storm tracker that was involved in the movie, and then also Bob Roloff. So some of our primary trackers got the opportunity to take the afternoon off, come with us. And so we all kind of gathered together, and then we took a look at what we thought. We watched the movie. It's about 2 hours, 2 minutes long. And we watched it from beginning to end, and we didn't talk to one another very much through the movie. And then we kind of, at the end, then we just sat down and kind of discussed it a little bit more in detail.
And then, I'm chomping at the bit. The reaction is good.
I would say from a meteorological standpoint, I thought they did a lot of things really well. Did they add a little Hollywood? Yeah, but some Hollywood needed to be added. I mean, you don't see an animated cow flying across the screen like in Twisters, the
original. Yeah.
And so some of those scenes are a lot more realistic. A lot of the scenes are a lot more, what should we say? What you would probably see in real life. So I was really impressed by how well it was put together, and how well that they made it a little bit more authentic than it would be Hollywood. So that was the first thing that impressed us. The second thing that impressed me was the music. What do you call it? The music bed, the music score.
Soundtrack.
Soundtrack, thank you. And so the soundtrack was, I'm a country person, and so they really took the Oklahoma narrative, so to speak, and kind of put that into the country music. And a couple of Zach Bryan, I think, has a pretty cool song that's in there that's already a hit. And so, and then there's several other ones I had not heard of that might have been just released with the movie. I don't know if they were pre-released or not, but they're really good ones. And a lot of them are slanted toward Oklahoma to begin with. But it really should be to me, because Oklahoma pretty much is the epicenter for the higher probability of these massive supercells that get going. And you can have tornadoes in any state.
Yeah.
That's, so it's like you can argue whatever you want to argue. But I would say that if I was ever going to come back again and want to see a tornado, I'd come back to Oklahoma.
Yeah, Tornado Alley is Tornado Alley. So it makes sense that the movie would come and shoot here in Oklahoma. And then I already knew they had a certain attention to detail, but just hearing you talk in detail about the attention to detail that they took making this movie, I definitely think it shows on the screen. I have a couple of plot points that I want to run past you.
Okay.
In the film, we got Daisy Edgar Jones, our by the book scientist. She's kind of a little bit of the nerdy stereotype. We got our Glenn Powell. He's our country boy. He's got the YouTube channel. He's doing a little bit more wild. And I want to ask you, do you see yourself as more of a Daisy Edgar Jones or as more of a Glenn Powell?
Well, since I don't do storm tracking because I have to spend all my time inside, when I was outside storm tracking before I had the job inside, it was probably more of a Glenn person. Now I'm kind of more of a Daisy person because you have to be a lot more nerdy because you have to be really focused and not make any mistakes. Because people's lives, I mean, if they tune you on and TV and they're wanting to watch and they're wanting to see, hey, is this real or not? What is Travis saying? What is he? And if I make a mistake, I mean, somebody's life could, if Stacia makes a mistake, Alan if any of us don't see what's going on and they're trusting that we're going to have a lot of good information for them. So we have to be very scientific. And when you don't have the responsibility, then you be a little bit more relaxed, good old boy. And that when I retire, that's probably where I'm going to head, is that direction a little bit more.
That was a very diplomatic answer. And I think the movie kind of shows that sometimes a good mix is a good kind of, I feel like both of these characters kind of bring themselves to the middle in the best way possible. You mentioned the impact these tornadoes have. And I was very curious how this film was going to handle that. But I think it handled it for the most part pretty well, understanding that this can be fun, cinematic, storm chasing, but at the same time, it has a very deep impact on these communities, and there are a lot of communities that are very devastated by that. And you already kind of touched on it a little bit, but would you like to just elaborate more on how you walk that balance in between, it is very good television, but also has a very deep impact, and maybe also touch a little bit on whether or not the film you thought handled that correctly as well?
This year probably sharpens, I don't want to say iron sharpens iron, but, this year, we had so many more tornadoes that were so devastating to communities. This was a unique year because it hit so many towns in Oklahoma. Normally, you'll hit a town or two a year that'll have a tornado. We're at 6 basically that had some significant damage. And a lot of people passed away this year because of tornadoes, and we're dealing with a lot of PTSD from tornadoes this year. And so it's really hard sometimes to separate the difference because when you have humor in something, yes, that helps sometimes with PTSD. But if you have PTSD, it's hard to break free from that. You have to really pick and understand something a lot more. We're dealing with some kids that were in a tornado in Barnstable. And I listened to their story, and I listened to how they were pulled out of their house. I listened to how they were rolled out into a field, how they flew over a pickup. I mean, that's real, Twisters. That's not a movie. That was the reality. That was real. And so it's when you realize something's real, people are really getting hurt, people are going to the hospital, and it's not just a movie. There's a sharp difference between that reality and that movie set. So when you're a meteorologist and you've seen the battles, I guess you could say the real battle, and then you've seen the movie, you can put it together and you can feel pretty good about this movie. I thought the beginning of the movie, and of course I won't say anything other than the beginning of the movie surprised me a little bit, and the path in which it took surprised me a little bit. And so that was cool. I didn't put it all together for a while. And so that helped, I thought, with the movie and made it a lot more interesting as it went through. Besides effects, I thought the storyline was pretty cool, and I liked what they did with that as well. So the only thing I would say is that if I was just in a tornado And if I am scared of tornadoes, I don't know if I'd really want to go to that
Sure.
movie for sure. It'd be too soon, I guess is the words I'd use to describe, because it's very impactful. And for anybody who's been in that, and after listening to these kids' stories, I'm just like, nah, that's not really for you at this point. You need
Right.
to kind of understand more. And that's what we try to do with the kids. I'm going to bring one more point up, but is that when with people that have PTSD on something, they need to have more information to understand it, because they're kind of in shock from what they had to go through, and then they have a fear. And of course, the more knowledge you have, the less fear you're most likely going to have. So what we try to do is just load them up with a tremendous amount of knowledge about meteorology,
Right.
how it works, what's going on, all these types of things. And we feel like we get quite a bit of ground. We're not the psychologist, and we don't have a psychiatric hospital sitting right next to us at Channel 6, but
Right.
it is, I think these are base steps that help a lot of people kind of walk through tornado PTSD.
Well, I think knowledge, that's a very important point to bring up as well. And I think it's on display in the film. They show, like, there's a scene, kind of after the rodeo sequence in the film, without giving too much away, there is a tornado attack in the movie Twisters. And they just showing Glenn Powell, Daisy Edgar Jones, they know exactly what to do because they know what to look out for. You see the other ends of the spectrum. You see somebody who's not taking it seriously enough and is like, oh, it's going to be fine. And then you see somebody else who's scared but doesn't know how to calmly do what they need to do in that situation. And I think, like, movies are fictional stories, but sometimes they can showcase kind of a message. And I think that was a very strong message, kind of along with what you're saying, knowledge is power in a situation like this.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that's an excellent point on that part, because that's a part that I even kind of just kind of brushed over. And yes, because there is a moment in the movie where you'll be able to kind of go, huh, I have choices. What am I going to do? And that pretty much tells the story of our people, of people in general, of what they're going to do, what they see, how they fear, how they think, and how they do. So I was overall, I was very pleased. And I know people, I've had my friends say, well, you're slanted, you're a meteorologist. What do you expect? It's a meteorology movie, it's about weather, duh. But I look at it with a little bit more of a critical eye, just because of the differences of, like, the science part versus the Yahoo part, I guess
Yeah.
you could say. And that makes a difference too.
Well, that's what I thought too. If anything, you're gonna because you know it more. You're gonna be more like, that's I can call that out, I can call that out. And one thing I want to say, and then one more question I want to ask before we get going here. But I just want to point out, we talked a little bit about Daisy Edgar Jones and Glenn Powell. I knew I liked Top Gun too, but man, what a movie star! In this movie, he's a movie star, and Daisy
Oh,
Edgar Jones held her own as well. The last thing I wanted to ask you, though, without giving the ending away, I guess, but the plot of the film is Daisy Edgar Jones has this whole plan to control a tornado and collapse it from the inside. And I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm just curious, is that 100% made up? Is there a base to it? Would you say 50%, 25%? That's the
I will
biggest
tell
question mark to
you,
me.
yeah, I will tell you, science so far has had a hard time trying to figure out how to do this. And I mean, I've been in meteorology for a long time. And so there's been there was a point where they even were thinking of exploding bombs up in the thunderstorms, because the thunderstorms have as potential energy as a hydrogen bomb. We
Yeah.
don't know about it because it's all above us, and that's where the explosive development of these storms are going on. But if you can wreck this updraft that's in these thunderstorms, they said, hey, if we can do that, we can just shoot these things in there, explode it up at 20, 30,000 feet, as long as it isn't full of pollution and stuff, and just disrupt the entire circulation. And therefore it'll be, that was something I read in the 80s, probably early 90s or something like that. They were thinking of experimenting with that. And then they decided, it's like, maybe that's not such a good idea. What happened if the detonation of the
Yeah.
bomb didn't happen timed out right?
Right.
And then it came back down to the earth. And they were like, okay, yeah. So that was like one of the first goofy thoughts I thought. I was like, you can't do that. And then there's a thing called silver iodide crystals, which is cloud seeding. There's been cloud seeding that's gone on for a long time. And then that's been going on 30 or 40 years. The problem is that then some of these cloud seeding companies have gotten sued, because some people will get flooded and they'll sue the company that did the cloud seeding, and it might not have anything to do with them, because nature is kind of yin and yang, give and take. And so there is a lot of places there where it has been difficult, but they do use silver iodide in the movie. crystals. And so that is part of research that has been done, and that is still, there's a lot of research about how could we control that. It's kind of scary, because if you start controlling that, I don't want to call it the butterfly effect, because that's far from it, but something else is going to happen. Domino theory, we could probably use that a little bit more so in this situation. There'll be something else that happens, kind of like silver iodide. It's like, hey, great idea, we'll get rid of this massive cloud and this storm, and then all of a sudden it's flooding rain. Go, doggone it, how did that happen? So there's constant research, but I found it interesting, and I thought it was unique, and it wasn't hokey. And that's probably the biggest part, without saying any more. I didn't think it was hokey. I thought, that's an interesting concept, and who knows? So I think that there's it's a part of the movie where it's reasonable. We'll put it that way.
They treat it seriously in the film, and because they treat it seriously in the film, they handle it in a way that I'm able to be like, all right, I'll suspend my disbelief. Maybe that we're not there yet, but I can believe in the world of this movie that this exists. So I recommend the film Twisters. I really went in not knowing what to expect. I thought a good time was possible, but I thought it was like a really good movie. So I would recommend it. I think it's safe to say that you do too, of course, with some asterisks depending on what you're going through here in Oklahoma.
Exactly. And if I was doing on a 6-star scale, I'd give it an easy 4.5. And probably 5, because I'm a meteorologist. If I'm really being a weather nut, of course 6. So if you're a weather nut, you'll love it. And even if you're not a weather nut, I think you'd love it. And the storyline's great. The music. I was trying to find something to be critical of, and I really couldn't. And I'm not a big movie critic, but I definitely should. I felt like I should be more critical, but I couldn't.
No, I'm feeling the same way. Well, Travis Meyer, thank you so much. Before I let you go, obviously we're recording this the weekend after the News on 6-1. Best evening newscast, 10 o'clock p.m. You've been doing this for a while. I've only been in this industry for 8 years. This is my first Emmy. Could you give a young gun like myself, what would you say to a young gun as I kind of just am beginning this TV journey?
Hey, this is amazing. Congratulations on that, because there is very, very seldom can you get an Emmy like that for the work that we do, and then what the things that you have done. Pretty doggone amazing. So I am pretty impressed. Take it and run with it. Well, don't run with it in case you fall. That looks like there's sharp objects on there, so be careful. And put it in a place where if there's a tornado, it won't go flying out the window.
Travis Meyer, thank you so much. All right, that's our show. I'd like to thank Travis Meyer for joining us this week. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and you follow us as well on your favorite podcasting app. We're going to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine, The Boys, so much more coming down the line on the Film Fan Club show. I'm Sam Carrico. I'll see you then.